Hey, sexy people. If you want to sleep with other people, if you want emotional connection with other people, if you want intimacy, bonding, or even love beyond one person, then why get married? That is one of the most common questions monogamous people ask when it comes to ethical non-monogamy. And honestly, I understand why they ask it. Because if you were taught that marriage means one person is supposed to meet all of your romantic, sexual, emotional, spiritual, and practical needs for the rest of your life, then yes, non-monogamy is going to sound like a contradiction. But here's what most people are missing. Marriage has always been about more than sex. The real question is not, why get married? The real question is, what do you believe marriage is actually for? Because if your only definition of marriage is sexual exclusivity, then of course, non-monogamy will never ever make sense to you. But marriage can be about partnership, commitment, shared values, family, legal protection, companionship, emotional safety, parenting, spiritual alignment, of course, building a life together. It does not have to be reduced to sexual ownership in order to have meaning. But before we get into this, hi, I'm Taylor K. Sparks, your ethical non-monogamy coach and sex goddess. And on this platform, we talk about love, relationships, freedom, emotional maturity, and creating relationship structures that are honest and aligned instead of forced and performative. So today we're unpacking this question. If you want other people, why get married? Because this question says a lot more about how people view marriage than it does about non-monogamy. When people ask, then why get married? What they usually mean is this: if marriage does not guarantee sexual exclusivity, then what's the point? And that right there is the problem. Because that mindset reduces marriage to ownership. It reduces marriage to access. It reduces marriage to control. It says, you are mine, I am yours, nobody else gets access, and that exclusivity is what makes this bond valuable. And I can hear you. I hear you out there saying, damn right, you were mine. But many people in ethical non-monogamy do not see marriage as ownership. They see marriage as partnership, commitment, chosen family, shared purpose, and a life built together. Not pretending that one person should be their everything. And yes, I hear you saying, but if they are not my everything, then I'm not going to be with them. And let me be clear with you on this. Marriage and monogamy are not the same thing. You have been told that they are, but they literally are not. Marriage is a legal, social, emotional, and sometimes spiritual agreement. Monogamy is a relationship structure based on exclusivity. Those two things often go together, but they are not inherently the same. You can be married and monogamous. You can be married and non-monogamous. You can be unmarried and deeply committed. You can be sexually exclusive and emotionally disconnected. And you can be non-monogamous and very much committed and in love. So a lot of people have confused exclusivity with intimacy, but those are not the same thing. Just because someone only has sex with one person does not automatically mean the relationship is healthy, honest, connected, or even fulfilling. And just because someone has the freedom to connect with others does not automatically mean that the marriage lacks depth, devotion, or commitment. Some of the most disconnected marriages are monogamous. Some of the most intentional marriages are not. That makes people uncomfortable, I know, but it really is true. And here's another truth that people do not always want to hear. One person cannot meet all of your emotional, sexual, intellectual, social, and energetic needs forever. That is a fantasy. It's maybe a beautiful fantasy for some people, but it's still a fantasy. And let me say this too. This is not an attack on monogamy, honestly. Some people generally thrive in monogamy, and that is good. Some people deeply desire exclusivity and feel fulfilled there. It's a beautiful thing. But even in healthy monogamous relationships, one person still does not meet every need. That is why people have friends, mentors, therapists, family. Well, family, I was already here before you got here, right? Creative collaborators and community. Because we already know in every other area of life, expecting one person to be everything is unrealistic. Yet, when it comes to romance and sex, suddenly people act like your spouse should be your best friend, your therapist, your co-parent, your financial partner, your roommate, your spiritual companion, your travel partner, your emotional support animal, your sexual fulfillment center, and lifelong source of novelty. And listen, what else is there, right? That is an enormous amount of pressure to put on one human being. So for some couples, and individuals, ethical non-monogamy is not a rejection of marriage. It is a rejection of impossible expectations. It is the understanding that needing more does not always mean that your partner is lacking. This is where monogamous people often take things personally. They hear, my partner wants connection with someone else, and then they translate it as, so why am I not enough? But not enough is often the wrong frame. A partner wanting additional connection does not automatically mean that you have failed them. Sometimes it means they're wide for variety. Sometimes it means they enjoy different forms of intimacy. Sometimes it means they have room for more than one bond. And sometimes it means they want expanded experiences, not replacement. It also sometimes means that they understand that love is not a scarce resource. Now, does that not mean everyone? That does not mean everyone has to accept that, right? But it does mean that we need to stop flattening human desire into this childish equation of, if you loved me enough, you would only want me. Yes, I said childish equation. That may sound romantic, but it's not always honest. People can deeply love their spouse and still be curious. People can deeply love their spouse and still value other forms of intimacy. People can deeply love their spouse and still know that one connection does not cancel another. Now, of course, this only works when it is ethical, not manipulative, not deceptive, not coercive, not I cheated, so now let's call it open. That is not ethical non-monogamy. That is a mess dressed up in a new language. But when two people honestly choose a structure that allows more than one connection, that is not automatically a threat to the marriage. It's windy out here, right? Sometimes it is simply a more truthful way of living, and sometimes when people ask, then why get married? What they are really asking is this: if sexual exclusivity is not the foundation, then what holds the relationship together? And that really is a fair question because, well, the answer is commitment, choice, values, and intention. Some people stay married because they are building a life together, raising children together, being family, trusting each other, and loving each other's mind, spirit, energy, and presence, because they are partners in the deepest sense of the word, because they choose each other over and over and over again, even while allowing room for expansion. That kind of commitment is not weaker than exclusivity. In many cases, it is stronger, because now the relationship is not being held together by fear, obligation, or rules alone. It is being held together by a conscious choice. I'm choosing you. And I think that is what scares some people, because if your partner has freedom and still chooses you, that is powerful. But if your relationship only works because there are walls around it, then maybe the walls are doing more work than the love. For many non-monogamous people, marriage is not a cage. It is home. Home is the person you build with. Home is the one who knows your history. Home is the one who sits with you in grief. Home is the one who helps care for the people you love. Home is a shared responsibility. Home is safety. Home is witness. Home is continuity. Home is partnership. And some people can have that home while still having meaningful, ethical experiences with others. Those outside connections do not always threaten the home. Sometimes they simply exist outside of it. Now, I want to be responsible and say this too. Just because marriage and non-monogamy can coexist does not mean everyone is equipped to do it well. Some people are using non-monogamy to avoid accountability. Some are using it to justify cheating. Some are using it because they want sexual access without emotional responsibility. Some are dragging an unwilling spouse into it. And some are just trying to save a broken relationship by opening it up instead of fixing what is already fractured. That is not what I'm defending here. If you cannot communicate, if you cannot be honest, if you cannot respect boundaries, if you can't regulate jealousy and your emotions, if you cannot take responsibility for your choices, then non-monogamy will expose every single tiny crack in your foundation. Marriage will not save that. Love will not save that. A fancy label, ethical non-monogamy, will not save that. Ethical non-monogamy requires maturity, and marriage within ethical non-monogamy requires even more intentionality. A lot of monogamous people actually understand this more than they think. They understand that you can love more than one child without loving either child less. They understand that you can have multiple close friends. They understand that different people bring out different sides of you. They understand that your spouse should not be your entire world. But when it comes to romantic or sexual connection, suddenly abundance becomes threatening. Why? Well, seriously? Well, because many people were taught that romantic love must be possessive in order to be real. That desire must be narrowed in order to be meaningful. That commitment must equal limitation. But ethical non-monogamy asks a different question. What if commitment is not about limiting desire? What if it is about handling desire with honesty? What if love is not proven by restriction? What if it is proven by integrity? That does not mean everyone has to live that way, but it does mean the question, then why get married, often comes from a very narrow understanding of what marriage can be. So, instead of asking, if you want other people, why get married? A better question might be this: what are the people in this marriage actually building together? Because that gets to the heart of it. Are they building trust, family, legacy, safety, pleasure, community, financial stability, healing, adventure, a shared life? If so, then the marriage still has meaning, maybe even profound meaning. Marriage is not meaningless just because it is not sexually exclusive. And frankly, I would rather see people build, relationships and marriages around truth than build marriages around appearances. Because a lot of people are technically monogamous in public and deeply, deeply dishonest in private. That is not superior just because it looks more socially acceptable. So if you are one of the people who has asked, then why get married? Here is my answer. Because marriage can be about love, partnership, devotion, family, stability, shared purpose, legal commitment, emotional grounding, and building a life together. Because sex is not the only thing that makes a marriage real. Because one person does not have to be everything in order to be deeply important. Because some people do not define commitment by exclusivity alone. Because for some, marriage is not about possession. It is about partnership. And because honest non-monogamy, when done ethically, may be far more respectful than pretending exclusivity exists while betrayal is happening. And most of the time it's happening behind closed doors. The issue is not whether people are married and non-monogamous. The issue is whether they are honest, aligned, respectful, and truly consenting. That is the conversation we need to be having, not this shallow idea that marriage only matters if nobody ever touches anybody else. That one definition is far too small for something as complex and sacred as partnership. Now, if this gave you something to think about, let me know in the comments, right? Do you believe marriage requires sexual exclusivity to be meaningful? Why? Why not? And if you are trying to navigate ethical non-monogamy with more clarity, honesty, and emotional maturity, book your free 20-minute clarity call with me at organiclovin.com/coaching. And until next time, your love, your rules, and your freedom. And realize I'm not here to make your choices for you. I'm here to support you in understanding them and in creating relationships that are as expansive and authentic as you are. Bye-bye.